So here we are for Axis Fest 2013. Our initial setup in the garage. Say hello, Chris.
Hello.
Got our creative environs here in the gaming garage. And most importantly, we have the initial setup of the board just to put subsequent updates into context. This is before any turns are made. Round 0, if you will. Crap load of Navy up there. And the rest of the board. So we'll be back after round 1. Okay, here we are at the beginning of round 2, 2013 Axis Fest. Interesting things have happened here on turn 1. We see that Germany, as you might have predicted, came away strong, taking the continent and not only building, but successfully defending from a UK air attack, a rather sizable navy. UK has brought its Canadian ships over and tried to fight back with its air force against the large contingent of Germans in the English Channel, but failed. Germany, otherwise, doing what you'd expect it to do. Real reversal from last year, however, is the fortunes of the Italians. The Italians sucking quite hard here on turn 1. Their navy wiped out by resurgent UK in the Mediterranean. That navy then surviving a counterattack from what was left of the Italian Navy and/or Air Force, decimating both. The northern African contingent here tried to attack Alexandria, got rebuffed, retreated, and now is in a holding pattern, their little fortress mentality going on. They managed to take Gibraltar for what it was worth, because, hey, that transport was going to die anyway, so those guys got to go somewhere. U.S. built a couple transports in the Atlantic, but reversing from last game is focusing on the Pacific. Now you'll see UK here also reaching out rather aggressively into the Arabian Sea, taking Persia on the first turn, getting a couple bonuses in IPCs and troops there. See some guys moving up from South Africa. Russia taking a decidedly pro-German, pro-European stance here, building up its tanks and fortifying that border here on round 1, and not attacking Japan up in the north, content to hold tight there and exploit the Mongolian rule. Japan tempted sorely, I might add, to attack the Russian contingent up there. Still not sure if that wasn't a mistake, but instead Japan has taken advantage of some of the void there in China to extend its buffer, but instead wholly devoting its navy to the Kwang Sea strategy. You'll see we built a naval base in Kwang Sea on round 1, dumped all the infantry and artillery that one could possibly get down to Kwang Sea on turn 1 to not only take but hold the Burma Road. In fact, demonstrating such commitment there by taking its hits on its air force that the UK and China chose not to even try to take it back. We see that with the ominous presence of the Japanese Navy here, both Calcutta and Anzac have chosen to build up infantry. On round 1, we have a little bit of naval presence there from the Japanese, but the U.S. making an equal and opposite move in the Pacific Ocean by consolidating all of its navy, not in Hawaii, but in Midway, mere inches away from the Japanese homeland, which currently stands barely defended. So here we are at the beginning of round 3, having just completed round 2, and we see the board has changed quite a bit. Germany pressing its advantage in England. Losing more ships than I would have liked there in the Erie Sea Zone, but not only took Scotland with some losses in aircraft, but held on to it after Chris decided not to take it back, not to try, hanging on to the planes he's got there in the UK and just storing up on infantry. So we see Germany here poised with a whole mess of transports, another aircraft carrier purchased, and some land units teed up. Two subs in Mediterranean here, starting to clean up Italy's mess. Italy, not much to say there. It took Greece, so that's something. Had its navy wiped out, but thanks to a German plane, and Chris's tactical step back here into the Red Sea, we finally did get the bonus for Italy for no Allied troops in the Mediterranean, and by taking over Greece, we got another bonus there. So Italy is just starting to make some money, but sure doesn't have a heck of a lot to show for it on the board. Again, by Chris's grace, we hung on to Tobruk because he chose not to attack it. So we've got a bit of a Cold War going on down there. We'll see who attacks first. Africa, not much else going on there. Russia, continuing to bide its time, build up along the European border there. Got a whole mess of tanks down here in Volgograd, I believe it is. A plane I see, just there to tease me. Which way they go? This way? That way? This way? That way? Who knows? UK, feeling the onslaught of the Japanese, so they are building up on defensive units here. Again, choosing not to initiate the attack this time around, but they are preparing themselves. Anzac just took Sumatra to boost its IPCs in a rule that I find troubling and illogical, but nevertheless building up guys down here to ward off the Japanese invaders. Now Japan, again, not initiating any declarations of war on round 2, but you'll see that it's spread out its navy amongst its 3 naval bases, and each one now having transports and some backup units, so force projection all across the board going on. No conflagration again this turn in Russia, biding their time over there, while again the U.S. Continuing to build up in Midway. Another backup fleet here starting to form off the western U.S. Whole lot of posing and preparation, not a whole lot of shooting going on in the Pacific. And that takes us to round 3. Okay, here we are. Actually, let's turn that over to round 4. It's about to start. Stuff about to go down. We see the U.S. having continued its build-up here in Midway with a couple other ships and dudes kind of waiting in the wings. Japan, on turn 3, having once again resisted the urge to splurge down in the South Pacific. Contrary to Chris's expectations, I might add. But we have no longer the luxury of waiting because Anzac and the UK have now declared war. Anzac declaring war here, pulling the trigger for the sake of collecting its bonuses, of which it gets many. We see that Japan's continued to build up down here, but it's spread its naval forces a little bit more evenly between its 3 naval bases. And part of the reason for that is we had the big showdown here in Russia. You'll see that there are no more Russian troops down anymore, but Japan lost all its ground forces going in, so Mongolia has flipped. And we've got to build up here now. Japan finally building a factory there in Kwang something or other. Russia, Not liking that. Russia has committed itself to the Middle East by pouring just a whole mess of dudes into northern Persia, about to go knocking on Saddam's door next turn. Here in North Africa, UK has finally wiped out the southern Italian contingent, leaving us kind of stranded here in Tobruk. But having backed off that battle that was brewing there between Tobruk and Alexander because my forces were too many, so he's kind of regrouped there in Egypt, made his way back into the Mediterranean, cutting off Italy's bonus. Italy having a pretty pathetic round 3, just building up its navy and not doing much else. Germany. I don't like the decisions I've made here. I think I may have taken my victory in London for granted, and I'm not sure that I have the requisite number of ground troops to make London go Nazi on turn 4. And if I fail, the UK is getting ready to go, or US rather, getting ready to go all Nazi up on me here in the Atlantic. We see that Chris is feeling so good about his odds, he's even spent money to build a transport in Canada just to add insult to what may well be injury in turn 4. And here we are at the beginning of turn 5. Well, turn 4 was mostly a bad turn for the Axis. Let's start out with what went right. Japan launched 2 of its 3 navies onto Midway, and even with a ballsy 3 transport full of ground units to take out the bombers that were on the ground while they still could prevent the U.S. from gaining some air superiority here over the navies. And to a large extent they succeeded. They destroyed the American Navy and killed all but 1 of the bombers, but were ultimately rebuffed from Midway. Hawaii there mildly reinforced. Northern Pacific empty on both sides. Over here, Japan decided to forego the Philippines for now and take a couple of these bonus islands, but India and China collaborated to take back the Yunnan and liberate the Burma Road. So China, now at the end of turn 4, is in control of all of its original territories. So that's interesting. Japan poised with quite a bit of military force still here in the South Pacific, but just when things were looking good for Japan and Zach, busts out its pesky little subs. Takes out 2 destroyers and 2 transports, leaving 4 guys stranded down here on Java. That's going to be fun. Over here, Russia dominating the board in Europe, taking Iraq. Have 4 countries now represented in Egypt. The big turn in this theater, however, is all of the UK's navy made an aborted attempt to invade Albania and were somehow rebuffed by a destroyer and a sub and a scrambled plane there in Italy. So Italy retains some territorial integrity, at least for another turn. Buying up guys, though, waiting for the inevitable invasion of the Americans, who somewhat predictably took Gibraltar. Germany, though, this is an ungodly story of the turn. Germany lost its nerve after adding up the odds and wishing it had more land units, decided to defer its invasion 1 turn, building up another 14 units in Scotland, and positioning its carriers in 2 different places so as to allow it some convoy disruption there in the UK, only to leave its northern fleet and all of its transports guarded by only 1 carrier and 2 planes, which were attacked by 1 lowly Russian sub. Of course, planes can't attack subs when there's no destroyers there, and the carrier rolled poorly. So now there are no transports in the German Navy, and that's just painful. Very likely going to go down as the definitive battle of the game. Russia having invaded northern and southern Germany, and Germany just trying to stay alive. It's going to be an ugly turn 5 for the Axis. Alright, we have the end of the game here in the midst of turn 5. We haven't even gotten to Japan's turn, although, you know, they were poised to do some cool stuff. We have done Germany and Russia so far. Germany sent what they had in Scotland into England, got mowed down in 2 turns, 2 rounds of attack. Germany successfully took out the American Navy at Gibraltar, losing its own navy in the process. So that has delayed the invasion of the Americans for 2 more turns, because all these transports over here got to get over there, and really they're not very well defended. If you send a few planes in there, you might be able to kill all the transports. There's only 1 destroyer. That said, it's not the Americans that are the problem in this game. It is by far the Russians who are the dominant story of today's game. So Russia poured into Europe. Germany was not able to take back Poland. Got them whittled down a little bit. Would have taken them the next round, but it lost Norway. It lost Bulgaria, Hungary, couple more territories down here that the Italians could not hold. You know, the Italians, they're probably going to take back Bulgaria if they try. Well, maybe not. They can take back Hungary, maybe. You know, between the Italians and the Germans, they can take back a couple of those territories. And the Russians, yeah, it takes their tanks a while to get there because they're so far away, and really he's low on infantry to support them. But critical factor here is Russia getting 80 IPCs this turn. Why? Well, because of this new rule that gives Russia a +3 bonus for every territory it controls that was Axis or pro-Axis to begin with. So here Chris has these tanks rolling in to take some northern African territories on behalf of the Russians. Has a unit coming in here to take Somaliland for the Russians. Another 12 in bonuses, just unearned money flowing in. And all that's going to get pumped out through these factories. He's going to build transport over there. He's going to start dropping guys. UK has no German threat to worry about anymore, so he's building an aircraft carrier and transports next turn. And that's a navy I won't be able to deal with. So, you know, who cares about the Americans? There's going to be nothing left by the time they get there. Germany's got 40 bucks in its bank. It's going to get 30, maybe 20 something the next turn. It's only a matter of time. And with 2 or 3 rounds left to go before Germany falls, Japan, a lot of cool stuff going on here, but not enough to turn the tide of the game. You know, it's going to take Kwang Tung. It's going to do some cool stuff. So I'm going to call the game here in the hopes that we might be able to squeeze out yet a second game this week. So I'm going to cap off with some strategic thoughts at the end of the game. This is a critical move here by Anzac. This sub here came and took out 2 destroyers and 2 transports, where together with the rest of my Navy and Air Force here in the area, my plan had been to forgo the Philippines, forgo Celebes and Sumatra, dump everything here into India, because Chris had left this, well, not undefended, but under-defended, you might say, in the face of all the troops that could conceivably get there with all the different transports I have available and naval bases and whatnot. You know, that's some cool stuff. That would have been a 50-50 shot at taking Calcutta. Kwang Tung was going to fall with Hong Kong. Philippines, if it didn't go this turn, it would go the next turn. At that point, I've got to only take Sydney or Hawaii, and I win the game, regardless of what Germany does. But that was just not going to happen in enough time. Because now that this navy has fallen, I can't take Calcutta. And by the time I get around to doing what I need to do, the Americans are going to start pouring in $100 a turn into the Pacific, and that's just, it's not good. It's not good. I gotta tell you, it's tempting to continue the game here because even with Germany falling, it's going to take the Americans forever to get here. By which time I may, possibly, have taken Hawaii, but you see, there's just not quite enough left to do that. Celebs, Sumatra, having lost this battle here, that's what I was going to do, take those. It's another 12 IPCs I would have gotten with the bonuses. I was going to take Philippines, join up here with this destroyer so that I have a credible threat against the Anzac Navy, and I was going to build a factory in Malaya, who already has a naval base. And so I was going to be a threat. Don't get me wrong, I was going to be a threat. I would have eventually taken Calcutta, I think, regardless of what happened in Germany. And then it would have been time to turn towards Sydney or Hawaii. Problem is, by that point there would be no Germany, and these guys here would probably be able to reinforce. So rather than seeing if I could pull that off, which, there's not an unreasonable chance of that happening, we're going to call it. We're going to call it. Let's see what happens. So, move I wish I would have made. In the end, it really didn't make a big difference. But turn 2 or 3, turn 2, I wish I would have sent a transport over here to India and then up and take over Iraq before Russia could get there and the UK people there. Would have slowed him down, wouldn't have turned the course of the game, but certainly would have slowed down the onslaught. Germany, if you're going to do London first, you got to do London first. My mistake was in my builds in rounds 2 and 3, and some of my movements. Committed my forces to other places, split up my planes. Didn't build up the amount of transports. I stopped at 7. Should have kept building more transports. And then I would have been in a position to take London on round 4, at least have a much better shot of it. And of course, having foregone that battle, I still might have had a decent chance the next round had I not left my transports unprotected, and one lone sub beat the odds and took down the entire fleet. So once that happened, it was really, really over. Italy, what can you do with Italy? It's tough. It's tough when the UK player is aggressive like they were. There's some bad rolls on both sides, but I don't know. The odds are not necessarily in Italy's favor here in the Mediterranean. Chris, I'm going to hand you the camera for some final thoughts.
Well, the principal thought is how much I absolutely suck at playing the United States, because they did nothing except generate vast navies that are now on the bottom of the ocean. There and there. Somewhere I read that it was a good idea to get a bunch of strategic bombers to try to land them in Amur to bomb people. Yeah, that didn't work so well. I probably won't be doing that again. Back to the drawing board for the U.S. But ultimately, they did what they needed to, which was stay around long enough to generate enough money long enough to pose a credible threat of coming in to mop up. The game was essentially won over here in Europe. The first shoe to fall was the crushing of the Italian Navy in the Mediterranean, which utterly neutered them in the Mediterranean and in Africa, so that I could hold all of those territories and prevent Italy from ever generating any income and ever becoming any material threat. And when you have to go London first, you have to go London first, which allowed the Russians to build up endlessly with a great swath of tanks so that I could roll through, taking those territories to pose a legitimate threat to the existence of Germany, The other thing that I thought worked well was keeping your options open in the Caucasus to either go east, west, or south, and when they decided to go sea lion, to go into the Middle East, to get those territories that are pro-Axis and to reinforce into Africa, because that opened up an oil pipeline that generated a ridiculously absurd amount of IPCs for Russia. That ultimately is the reason why the game was called. So the moral of the story is, I think I effectively bought guys for the UK, for as good as that was. Good plays in the Mediterranean against Italy. Russian was the dominant player. And the US, they totally sucked. So we're going to have to do better on that next time. That is all.
Okay, addendum to Game 1 of 2013. This game is now totally under protest. So you'll see the board correctly set up here in New Zealand lacks a factory. Ergo, no place to build the extra subs that had been streaming their forth.
Except in this factory here, which would still have been 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, except for you already built like 3 dudes there. And several other things during the course of the game.
The turning point, the extra guy couldn't have built.
So, note for future posterity there. The Ghost sub won the game.
Warm-up game. The weird thing is I went through all the fucking pieces twice. I don't know why.
There's just so many of them. Here's protest point number 2. Chris put a battleship in the Mediterranean for the UK instead of a cruiser, which did actually require the investment of quite a few Italian planes. Alright, just for posterity's sake, we've discovered cheat number 3. Chris moved Russian tanks or units into northwest Persia before it was at war on the European board, which we have determined by consensus was in fact mistaken. Of course, we all know how influential those Russian tanks were in Iraq.